Mom, starting next month, we'll move all your money into my account, my son said smugly. I just smiled. That night, like always, he and his wife came over for a free dinner, but the moment they walked through the door, they both screamed in shock. My own son, the man I built a life for, looked at me with a sickeningly calm smile and said, Mom, from your next paycheck, we're transferring all your money to my account. Just like that. As if he was doing me a favor, as if I, at 62, had suddenly lost the ability to manage my own life. I just stared at him. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't breathe. My eyes searched his, desperately trying to find an explanation. How could the boy I raised alone, the child I fed with the literal sweat of my brow, ask for total access to my bank account? But there was nothing there. Just that placid, almost smug smile, the confidence of someone completely in control. So I took a shaky breath. And I said yes. I told him it sounded fine. That I trusted him. His smile widened, a victory flash. He stood up, gave me a quick, empty kiss on the forehead, one of those kisses that mean absolutely nothing, and told me it was for the best. You won't have to worry about a thing, Mom, he said. I'll take care of everything. It's for your own good. For your own good. Those words just hung in the air after he walked out, echoing in my suddenly too quiet house. That very same Friday night, Lawrence came back. He always did, with his wife. They'd come expecting dinner to be hot, the table set, free food waiting, just like it had been every Friday for the past 3 years. I heard them arrive. Footsteps on the porch. The familiar click of the key I'd given him in the lock. The door opening. And then, I heard it. A scream. High-pitched. Desperate. The sound of someone who just realized things weren't going their way. I stayed perfectly still, seated in my chair in the empty kitchen, in my empty house. I listened to that scream bounce off the bare walls. I didn't move. I didn't even go to see. I already knew. Lawrence burst into the kitchen, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. His wife followed, wearing the same stunned expression. Mom, he yelled. Mom, what did you do? Where is everything? The furniture. The TV. Everything that was here. I looked at him with a calmness I didn't even know I possessed. My voice, soft as a whisper, replied, Oh, I sold some things. I needed the money. After all, if you're going to be managing my finances, I figured I should make sure I had some cash first. His face went from pale to scarlet, from shock to pure, unadulterated fury. He took a step towards me, and in that moment, I saw him for who he truly was. Not the boy I'd poured my life into. Not the young man I'd sacrificed everything to help build a future. But a stranger. A predator. Someone looking at me with contempt, with rage, with something that looked dangerously close to hatred. You're crazy, he spat. Completely crazy. How could you sell everything without asking me? Now what are we going to do when we come over? How are we going to be comfortable here? That was the sentence that changed everything. How are we going to be comfortable here? Not, how are you going to be comfortable, Mom? He wasn't worried about me. Only about them. As if my home was just an extension of theirs. As if my things existed solely for their convenience. His wife edged closer. Her eyes, always so cold and calculating, fixed on me. She said something I will never, ever forget. She called me selfish. Said I was only thinking of myself. Said they came every week to keep me company, to make sure I was okay, and this was how I repaid them. Selfish? Me? The woman who worked double shifts for years so he could go to college. The woman who gave up a chance at a new life after his father walked out, because I didn't want my son to grow up with a stepfather. The woman who lived in tiny apartments, wore old clothes, ate rice and beans just so he could have everything he needed. Selfish. Lawrence just stood there, staring at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he delivered the blow that truly broke something inside me. He said maybe it had been a mistake to suggest the bank account. Maybe I wasn't in a condition to make good decisions. Maybe I needed more help than he thought. More help. As if I were a burden. An incapable old woman who needed to be controlled. I rose from my chair. Then I looked at them both, and my voice, stronger than I expected, cut through the tension. Dinner isn't ready, I said. There is no dinner. If you're hungry, you can go eat somewhere else. The silence was thick, suffocating. Lawrence gawked at me, disbelief etched on his face. His wife let out a dry, bitter laugh, muttering something under her breath about respect and gratitude. Then Lawrence said it. The sentence that still echoes in my mind when I close my eyes at night. With a coldness I'd never heard from him, he warned me to be careful. A woman my age, alone, without family who truly cared about her, could end up in a very bad place. He was the only thing I had. I should remember that before I did something stupid. They left. They stormed out, slamming doors, leaving a trail of raw rage and thinly veiled threats. I heard them get into their car. Heard the engine roar to life. Heard them drive away. I stood in my empty kitchen, in my empty house, feeling something inside me break for good. But it wasn't sadness. Not despair. It was something else. It was clarity. A chilling, absolute certainty that my son didn't love me. Maybe he never had. That to him, I was just a resource. A source of money. Food. Convenience. I sank back into my chair. I looked at the bare walls of my living room. The empty spaces where furniture, bought with my own labor, my own effort, used to be. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. Because Lawrence didn't know something. He didn't know I hadn't sold the furniture for money. I had sold it to send a message. To see how he would react. To confirm what my heart already suspected. And he had reacted exactly as I expected, with rage, with indignation, with the entitlement of someone who believes they have a right to another person's possessions. That night, as I sat in the darkness of my empty house, I made a decision. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to observe. I was going to wait. I was going to let Lawrence believe he had one. And then, when he least expected it, when he was most confident, most sure of his control over me, I was going to show him who Patricia Mendes really was. Not the submissive mother he thought he knew, but the woman who had survived a broken marriage, poverty, and years of relentless hard work. The woman who knew exactly how to protect herself. The woman he should never have underestimated. There was a time when I believed being a mother was enough. That the love I gave would naturally be returned. That the daily sacrifices I made would build something solid, unbreakable between my son and me. How devastatingly wrong I was. Lawrence was born on a stormy night 34 years ago. His father, the man who promised me a future, left when Lawrence was barely 2. He said he wasn't ready to be a dad, that he needed to find himself. That I would understand someday. I never understood. But I didn't wait. I was left alone, a tiny child, a 2-bedroom apartment I could barely afford, and a secretary job paying $800 a month. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. So I got a second job, cleaning offices at night. I'd leave Lawrence with my kind neighbor, an elderly woman who charged $50 a week. I worked from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the office, rushed home to feed, bathe, and tuck Lawrence into bed, then left again at 9 p.m. to clean buildings until 2 a.m. 4 hours of sleep, then I'd start all over. I did that for years. So many years I lost count. I remember Lawrence always wanted the brand name sneakers the other kids wore. They cost $120. I made $1,200 a month from both jobs. That $120 was almost all my food money for 2 weeks. But I bought them for him. I didn't want him to feel less than anyone else. I wanted him to know his mother would do anything for him. I ate rice and beans for an entire month to pay for those sneakers. When Lawrence turned 18, he wanted to go to a private university, $15,000 a year. I didn't have that money. Not even a tenth of it. But I went to the bank. I took out a loan. I was in debt for 4 full years of his education. It took me 10 years to pay off that loan, 10 years of payments so my son could have a college degree. He graduated. Got a good job. He was making $3,000 a month, double what I was earning after 30 years of work. I was happy. I thought, finally, he can build his life. I've done my job as a mother well. But Lawrence didn't leave my house right away. He said he wanted to save money, build a solid foundation before going out on his own. Of course, I told him. My house is your house. Stay as long as you need. He stayed 5 more years. 5 years where I still worked my 2 jobs. 5 years where I paid the rent, the food, the utilities. 5 years where Lawrence saved every single cent of his salary because he didn't have to pay for anything. When he finally moved out, it wasn't to rent an apartment. It was to buy a house. A $200,000 house he paid for in cash, because he'd saved all his money during those 5 years of living for free in my home. I was proud. I told him I was. I thought I had done the right thing by helping him. I thought, now that he has his own house, maybe he could help me. Maybe I could work less. Maybe I could rest a little. But that never happened. Lawrence married 2 years after he moved out. His wife was an elegant woman, always perfectly dressed, impeccable nails, a polite tone of voice that somehow always hinted at disdain. From the start, I sensed she looked at me differently, as if I were somehow beneath her, as if she couldn't comprehend why Lawrence came from where he came from. At the wedding, which cost a small fortune, I sat at a table in the back. Not the main table with the family. Lawrence explained it was for important people, clients from his job. I nodded, said I understood. I smiled in the pictures. Danced when asked. Went home alone that night, feeling a strange emptiness. After the wedding, Lawrence's visits became sparse. Before, he'd come 2 or 3 times a week. After, once every 2 weeks. Then once a month. Always in a hurry, always on his phone, always with an excuse to leave early. I never said a word. I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the one who complained, the one who didn't understand her son had his own life now. But then they started coming on Friday nights. Always at dinner time. Always without notice. Always expecting me to have food ready. At first, I was delighted. I thought, he misses me. He wants to spend time. So I'd cook his favorite dishes. Set the table beautifully. Buy dessert. But I noticed something. He never came alone. Always brought his wife. And they never came to talk. They came to eat. They'd arrive, sit down, devour the food, and leave. Sometimes they stayed an hour. Sometimes less. I also noticed they never brought a thing. Not a bottle of wine. Not a dessert. Never any money to help with groceries. Nothing. One night, after they left, I calculated how much I'd spent on dinner. $45. $45 I didn't have to spare. $45 that meant I'd have to work extra hours to make it up. And I realized something profound, something sickening. To Lawrence, I had become a service. A free restaurant. A place where he could come to eat without paying, without even a sincere thank you. I started noticing other things, too. When I asked him for help, he always had an excuse. When I needed a ride to the doctor because my car broke down, he was always busy. When I mentioned my refrigerator was making strange noises, worried it would die, he just told me to buy a new one. As if I had $500 saved for emergencies. I didn't. I barely scraped by till the end of the month. But what hurt the most? My 60th birthday. Lawrence arrived 2 hours late. No gift. No card. Just an excuse about traffic. He stayed 20 minutes. Ate the cake I'd bought for myself, because I didn't want to celebrate alone. Then he left. I cried that night. Cried like I hadn't cried in years. Because I finally understood what I'd been denying for so long. To my son, I was no longer important. I was just a resource. Something available. Waiting to be used whenever he needed me. The worst part. I had allowed it. I had set that pattern. I never asked him for anything. Never told him I felt used. Never told him I needed more than 20-minute visits and free Friday dinners. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I complained, if I asked, if I demanded, he would disappear completely. The thought of losing my son, even this son who barely saw me, terrified me more than anything. So I continued to be the convenient mother. The silent mother. The mother who was always there, always had an open door, never caused problems. Until that Thursday afternoon. Until Lawrence told me he wanted to manage my money. Something inside me, something that had been asleep for years, woke up. A small, clear voice that whispered, "This isn't right. This is the beginning of something worse." But even then, with that voice screaming in my head, I told him yes. Because I still had hope. I still wanted to believe my son loved me. That he would protect me. That he would do the right thing. How utterly foolish I was. The following Monday, Lawrence arrived at my house, armed with papers. Lots of them. He spread them across the kitchen table with that smile I now saw as calculating, not warm. "Mom, this is simple," he said. "Just sign here, here, and here. These documents give me access to your account so I can automatically transfer your paycheck each month. I'll handle all your bills. Manage everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at the forms. Bank forms. Authorization forms. I read the fine print, the stuff people usually ignore. And something chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just access. This was complete power. The authority to make transfers, close accounts, make any financial decision on my behalf. Lawrence, I said, this states you'd have total control over my money. He nodded, as if it were the most natural thing. Yes, Mom. It's easier this way. I can manage everything without asking you for authorization every time. It's for practicality. Practicality. That word echoed in my head. Practicality for whom, I wondered, but didn't say it aloud. I took the pen he offered, held it. For a moment, I was about to sign. To hand over everything. Because that's what I'd always done. Trust. Hand over. But then I remembered Friday night. His face, contorted with fury, seeing my empty house. His chilling words. His threat, even if he didn't recognize it as one. I put the pen down. You know what, Lawrence? Give me a few days to think. I want to read everything carefully. I want to be sure. His expression flickered. A flash of irritation, quickly masked by that smile. Mom, there's nothing to think about. It's simple. But fine. Take a few days. He left, but he left the papers. As if it were a foregone conclusion I'd sign. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just stared at those papers on the kitchen table. Something deep inside told me this wasn't for my own good. This was the precipice of something I couldn't undo once it began. The next day, I went to the bank. Early, before work. I asked the teller to check my account, to show me all transactions from the last 6 months. She printed pages and pages. I checked every line. And then I saw it. I saw it, and the floor moved beneath my feet. A withdrawal I hadn't made. $1,200. From 3 months ago. Money gone from my account, and I didn't remember taking it out. I asked for more details. The teller checked her computer. What she said next stole my breath. The withdrawal had been made at a branch clear across town, with my debit card. But I'd never been to that branch. And my card was in my purse. It had always been there. Except for one time. I remembered. 3 months ago. Lawrence had visited. I was in the shower when he arrived, yelling for him to come in. The door was open. When I came out, he was waiting in the living room. We talked. At some point, I went to make coffee. My purse was in my handbag. My handbag was in the living room. With Lawrence. Nausea rose. The world tilted. It could only mean one thing. My son had taken my card. Memorized or photographed the numbers. And stolen money from my account without my permission. I asked the teller if I could find out more. She said I needed to file a formal claim, an investigation that would take weeks. I said I'd think about it. I left the bank, feeling like I no longer knew my own son. But I didn't file the claim. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Was this a one-time thing? Or more? The next few days, I became a detective in my own home. I went through everything. Every paper, every document, every old bank statement I had saved in a box in my closet. And I found more. 2 years ago, when I was in the hospital with pneumonia, someone had used my health insurance for consultations I hadn't made. Clinics I'd never heard of. Consultations that had exhausted my annual coverage, forcing me to pay out of pocket for medications that year. Then I found it. A credit card in my name I didn't remember applying for. With a balance of $3,000. $3,000 in purchases I hadn't made. Stores I'd never visited. I called the credit card bank. Asked when the account was opened, 18 months ago. Asked where the purchases were made, hardware stores, electronic stores, home furniture stores. Lawrence had bought a house 2 years ago. Lawrence had renovated that house. And apparently, Lawrence had used my credit to do it. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by papers, feeling like my entire life, everything I believed, was crumbling. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal. It was knowing my son had been systematically stealing from me for years. That he had seen me as an unlimited resource, never intending to care for me or protect me. I cried. Cried until I had no more tears. Then I wiped my face, gathered all the papers, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. No yelling. No complaining. Because I knew if I did, he'd deny everything. He'd say I was confused. Say I was senile. Anything to make me doubt my own memory, my own sanity. No. I was going to be smarter. I was going to collect proof. Document everything. Build a case so solid he couldn't deny it. Only then would I act. That Friday, Lawrence came back. At dinner time, as always. expecting food. But this time, I had cooked something different. His favorite dish, chicken with sauce and rice. The same dish I made when he was a sad little boy, home from school. The dish that told him how much I loved him without words. He sat at the table with his wife. They ate. Talked about superficial things, work, weather, a new movie. I watched them. Watched them as if I was seeing them for the very first time. And I realized something. Lawrence ate my food with the same indifference he'd eat a fast food burger. No gratitude in his eyes. No love. Just the mechanical act of eating something free. When they finished, Lawrence pulled out the bank papers again. Placed them right next to his empty plate. Mom, the days you asked for have passed. You've thought about it, right? Sign this, and I'll take care of everything. I looked him straight in the eyes. My voice, calm as could be, replied, I'm still not sure. I need more time. His wife scoffed. Patricia, this is ridiculous. Lawrence is just trying to help you. I don't understand why you're being so distrustful. Distrustful? She called me distrustful. The saddest part was, she was right. But not in the way she thought. Lawrence stood up. His face was hard now, the mask of a smile gone. Mom, this is for your own good. You can't keep managing your finances alone. It's obvious. Look at how you sold the furniture without thinking. Look at the irrational decisions you're making. Irrational. Selling my own furniture in my own house was irrational. But stealing from me for years wasn't. I said nothing. I just held his gaze until he looked away. They left that night without a word. And I stayed seated in my kitchen, looking at those unsigned papers, knowing the war had just begun. A silent war. A war I had to win. Because if I lost, I wouldn't just lose my money. I would lose my dignity, my autonomy, my life. The days after that, the silence in my house was strange. Lawrence didn't call. He didn't visit. It was his punishment, I realized. He thought I'd crumble without him. That I'd beg him to come back, sign those papers just for his attention. But I didn't crumble. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of clarity. I spent those days meticulously going through every detail of my financial life. Every receipt. Every bank statement. Every piece of paper that hinted at money. And the more I looked, the more I found. I discovered that 3 years ago, when Lawrence asked to borrow my ID, he'd lost his and needed to pick up an urgent package, he'd done something else with it. He'd opened an electricity service account in my name. At an address that wasn't mine. At his house. For 3 years, his electricity bill had been in my name. And when he didn't pay on time, the penalties piled up on my credit history. That's why I'd been denied a small loan last year for car repairs. That's why my credit score had mysteriously plummeted. I called the electricity company. Explained the account wasn't mine, I'd never lived there. The woman on the phone said I needed to file a sworn. Deep down. But hearing it said aloud by a professional made it terrifyingly real. What can I do? I asked. He leaned forward. First, don't sign anything. Second, report the credit card fraud and the theft from your bank account. Third, change all your passwords, PINs, everything. Fourth, consider a restraining order if you feel in danger. A restraining order. Against my own son. The idea was absurd, devastating. I don't want to get him in legal trouble, I said. He's my son. The lawyer looked at me with compassion. Mrs. Mendes, your son is already in legal trouble. He's committed several felonies. The question isn't whether you want to get him in trouble. The question is whether you want to protect yourself. I left that office with a folder full of forms and a list of things to do. Overwhelmed, yes, but also strangely light. Determined. I went straight to the bank. Changed all my passwords. Requested a new debit card. Closed the fraudulent credit card and filed a formal dispute. The teller, patient and kind, helped me through it all, never making me feel stupid or weak. When I got home that afternoon, I was exhausted. But it felt like an invisible weight, carried for years, had finally lifted. That night, Lawrence finally called. His voice was tense. Mom, we need to talk. Come over for dinner at my place tomorrow. We have to sort this out. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Before, I would have obeyed without question. But now, after everything I'd discovered, I only felt a cold calm. I can't tomorrow, I told him. I'm busy. Busy? Mom, what could you possibly be busy with? For you, maybe, I said. For me, there are other, more important things now. A silence. Heavy. Full of surprise and irritation. You're acting very weird, Mom. I don't know what's wrong with you, but you need to stop being so stubborn and sign those papers. This is for your own good. For my own good. Those words again. As if stealing from me was an act of love. Lawrence, I said, my voice firmer than I expected, I'm not signing anything. And I think we need to have a very serious conversation about several things. About what things? His voice changed. More alert. More cautious. About money that has left my account without my permission. About credit cards I didn't apply for. About utility accounts in my name at addresses where I don't live. The silence that followed was absolute. So thick, I could almost feel it through the phone. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said. His voice was controlled, but I heard the panic beneath it. I think you do, I told him. And I think you need to think very carefully about what you're going to say next. Mom, you're delusional. You're confused. Maybe you need to see a doctor. There it was. The card I knew he'd play. To make me seem senile, confused, incapable. I'm not confused, Lawrence. I have all the papers. I have all the proof. And I've already spoken with a lawyer. Another silence. Longer. Heavier. You spoke with a lawyer. His voice was barely a whisper. Almost a threat. Yes. And he explained exactly what you've been doing. He explained what fraud is. What's illegal. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your son. Everything I've done has been to help you. Help me. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Lawrence, you stole from me. For years, you used me. You lied to me. I would never, he began, but I cut him off. Yes, you did. And you know it. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? I heard his heavy, agitated breathing on the other end. I'm coming over, he said. We need to talk in person. No, I told him. You are not coming over. If you want to talk, we can do it on the phone. Or we can do it with lawyers present. You're crazy, he yelled. Completely crazy. After everything I've done for you, after all the times I've come to see you, that I've worried about you. All the times you came to eat for free, you mean. All the times you needed something from me. But the times I needed you, where were you? I hung up then. Before he could respond. Before he could manipulate me with words again. I stayed there, sitting in my kitchen, phone in hand, trembling. Not with fear. With rage. Years and years of suppressed rage, finally finding its voice. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because I had finally spoken my truth. I had finally stood my ground. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I was no longer the silent mother who allowed herself to be trampled on. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. As if a thick fog had lifted from my mind. I could see everything with an almost painful sharpness. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stop now. If Lawrence thought I was a confused, helpless old woman, he was about to discover how utterly wrong he was. My first stop was the main bank where I kept my savings. Not the checking account with my paycheck, but the other one, opened 30 years ago when I still dreamed of buying my own house. $7,200 saved. Not much after a lifetime of work, but it was mine. I asked the manager to close the account. She asked if I was sure, if there was a problem. I just said I wanted to make some changes. She gave me the money in a cashier's check and recommended a different bank for security. I followed her advice. A new bank, on the other side of town, where Lawrence had never been with me. A new account. One only I knew about. An account he could never find. Next, the electricity company. I filed all the documents Attorney Sanchez had helped me prepare. The sworn statement. My ID. Proof I'd never lived at that address. The woman helping me confirmed they would start an investigation, transfer or close the account. I wouldn't be responsible anymore. It felt like an invisible chain had been removed from my shoulders. My next stop, the credit bureau. I requested a full report. I wanted to see everything. Were there more things Lawrence had done? The employee handed me a thick document. I sat in the waiting room, reading page by page. And there was more. A personal loan of $5,000, taken out 2 years ago in my name. Never fully paid. Now in collections. $5,000. Rage rose in my throat like bile. I marked every fraudulent item with a highlighter. Filled out the dispute forms one by one, with clear, firm handwriting. When I left that office, it was almost 3 p.m. I hadn't eaten, but I wasn't hungry. I had something stronger than hunger. I had purpose. Then, I went to my neighbor, Mrs. Alice Morrison. 70 years old. Lived in the building longer than me. We'd been friends for decades, though lately, we'd drifted. I'd been so consumed by Lawrence, by trying to hold on to that relationship, that I'd neglected other connections. I knocked. She opened the door, surprised. Patricia. What a surprise, come in, come in. We sat in her living room. She offered me coffee, and I accepted. She looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen so much. You look different, she said. I don't know what it is, but there's something different about you. And then I told her everything. About Lawrence. The money. The betrayal. Everything I'd uncovered. I talked for almost an hour, without stopping. She listened, without interrupting, nodding occasionally, an expression that mixed sadness with a profound recognition. When I finished, she sighed. Patricia, I knew something wasn't right. I saw it every Friday. The way he treated you, like you were a service. But I didn't say anything, it wasn't my place. But I'm glad you're finally seeing the truth. She took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. I need to ask you a favor, I told her. I need you to be my witness. If Lawrence comes, tries to say I'm confused, senile, I need you to confirm that I am in full control of my faculties. She nodded without hesitation. Of course. And more than that, if you ever don't feel safe in your house, my door is open. Those words filled me with a gratitude so deep it almost made me cry. But I didn't. I had cried enough. Now, it was time to act. That night, back in my house, I organized all the documents. A large folder. Copies of everything. Originals in a safe place. Copies in the folder. If anything happened to me, if Lawrence tried anything, there would be evidence. Proof. I also wrote a letter. Detailing everything. Everything Lawrence had done. Sealed it in an envelope, with instructions for it to be opened only in an emergency. I gave it to Mrs. Alice to keep. I was preparing myself like a general for battle. I knew Lawrence wouldn't let this go. He would come. He would try to manipulate, to convince, to make me doubt myself. But I was no longer the woman I'd been 2 weeks ago. That woman died the night Lawrence threatened me in my own kitchen. The woman I was now was different. Stronger. Clearer. More determined. On Wednesday afternoon, as I was making tea, I heard a car pull up. I looked out the window. Lawrence's car. He got out with his wife. They looked determined. They were coming to confront me. I took a deep breath. Put down my teacup. And waited. The doorbell rang. Once. Twice. 3 times, each more insistent. I opened the door, but I didn't invite them in. I stood on the threshold, blocking the entrance. We need to talk, Lawrence said, his voice hard, devoid of any pretense of warmth. I'm listening, I told him. Inside, Mom. We're not talking in the hallway. We have nothing to talk about inside. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. His wife scoffed. This is ridiculous, Patricia. Stop acting like we're enemies. You're not enemies, I replied. Enemies are honest about their hostility. You are worse. You are thieves who hide behind pretty words. Lawrence took a step towards me, face red with fury. How dare you? After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me, Lawrence. My voice was calm, surprising even me. I have the records. I have the proof. I know exactly how much money you've stolen. The fraudulent credit cards. The electricity account. I know about everything. He froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And now, I continued, you have 2 options. Either you return everything you stole from me, every single cent. Or I go to the police and file charges for fraud. You can't do that, his wife shrieked. He's your son. That's precisely why it hurts so much, I replied. Because he's my son. Because I gave him everything, and he repaid me by stealing. Lawrence finally found his voice. You owe me, he yelled. My whole life, I grew up without a father. My whole life I saw you work, tired. That was your fault. You chose to have me. You chose to stay alone. I didn't ask to be born. His words landed like physical blows, but they no longer hurt me the way they once would have. Now, I saw them for what they were, justifications. Excuses from someone who knew he'd done something unforgivable and was trying to shift the blame. You're right, I told him. I chose to have you. And it was the best decision of my life, until it stopped being. But that doesn't give you the right to steal from me. To exploit me. I didn't steal anything from you. I just took what was owed to me. Nothing was owed to you, Lawrence. I gave you everything you needed when you were a child. As an adult, it was no longer my obligation. And it definitely wasn't my obligation to give you access to my money without my knowledge. His wife grabbed his arm. Let's go. It's not worth it. She's already lost. Lost? I echoed. What an interesting choice of words. As if I were the one who was wrong. As if defending my own money and dignity were crazy. They left. Stomped down the stairs without a backward glance. I closed the door, feeling strangely calm. That night, Attorney Sanchez called. The banks had confirmed the fraud. The credit card would be cancelled. The unauthorized withdrawals were being investigated. I had a solid case for criminal charges. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in my empty living room, in my house that no longer had a TV or elegant furniture. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt rich. Rich in something money couldn't buy. Rich in dignity. In strength. In the certainty that I was doing the right thing. The days that followed that confrontation at my door were strangely silent, as if the whole world was holding its breath. I found myself in a kind of emotional limbo, where rage and pain mixed with a growing sense of liberation I barely knew how to process. Lawrence didn't call again. He didn't show up. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly waiting for his contact, checking my phone, making excuses for his absence. But even without his physical presence, his digital one was impossible to ignore. Something in me pushed me to check his social media. I normally didn't, it felt like an invasion of privacy, even for his mother. But now, I felt I had a right to know what he was doing, what he was saying, how he presented his life to the world while I dealt with the private fallout of his actions. What I found left me breathless with its audacity. The absolute disconnect between reality and the image he projected. The day after our confrontation, he posted a photo, him and his wife, smiling in an elegant restaurant, wine glasses in hand. The caption was about celebrating the release of toxic energies and surrounding oneself only with people who bring value. As if I were the toxicity he needed to shed. As if refusing to let him steal more was a negativity he'd wisely removed from his life. The comments below were all positive, congratulating him on mental peace, healthy boundaries, prioritizing emotional well-being. I stared at the screen, a mix of disbelief and disgust. All those people supporting him had no idea the man they celebrated had been stealing from his own mother for years. More posts followed, each more elaborate. He was deliberately constructing a public narrative completely divorced from the truth. A photo at the gym, reflecting on self-care and investing in oneself before helping others. Profound words, until you remembered he'd bought his gym membership and expensive clothes with my stolen money. Another photo, working on his computer, a comment about the sacrifice and hard work needed to build a successful future. No mention that this future was partly financed with fraudulent credit cards in my name, and utility accounts I was unknowingly paying. What truly wounded me was a post that Friday, the very day he would normally have come to my house for dinner. He shared an old photo of us. One I didn't even know he had. Me holding him, maybe 5 years old, both of us smiling. The text read something about how, sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the most. About learning that love doesn't mean tolerating abusive behavior. About making the difficult decision to distance himself from a toxic family relationship for the sake of his mental health. Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. Lawrence had taken our story, our real, complicated, painful relationship, and completely inverted it. He was the victim. I was the abuser. The comments poured in, even more than before. Dozens of people expressing support, calling him brave, sharing their own stories of difficult family. Validating his fabricated version of events. People I knew were there. Neighbors who remembered him living with me. Co-workers who'd been to parties at my house years ago. All offering encouragement, not knowing that the toxic person he needed to protect himself from was the same woman who worked 2 jobs for years to give him the education he now used to get his high-paying job. For days, I watched this digital spectacle in silence. No comments, no public reaction. I knew this was Lawrence's game, and if I responded emotionally, I'd fall into his trap, giving him more ammunition for his narrative of the unstable, problematic mother. But every new post, every new supportive comment from people who didn't know the truth, was a small wound opening deep inside. Not because I cared what those people thought of me, but because it hurt to see how easily people believed a well-told story, without ever questioning if there was another side. The last straw came with a story he posted, a tour of the house he and his wife had bought. The renovations. The new furniture. The perfectly designed garden. All presented as the fruit of his hard work and dedication. Without a single mention that a significant part of it was paid for with money that wasn't his, with credit obtained fraudulently using my personal information. He showed it all with such pride, such satisfaction, as if he truly believed he'd earned it. As if he had completely forgotten, or simply didn't care, that every brick of that house was partially built on the sacrifice and theft from his own mother. I watched him live his life in those small digital windows, and I wondered, how could someone sleep at night knowing what they had done? How could he maintain that facade of a successful, ethical person while simultaneously committing fraud and theft against the woman who gave him life? Did he ever feel guilt? Ever, in the middle of an elegant dinner or a gym workout, stop for a moment and think about his mother, sitting alone in an empty house, having sold her furniture so she could eat, because her own son had been systematically stealing from her for years? But seeing his posts, the ease with which he built and maintained this perfect public image, I came to understand something fundamental about Lawrence. Something I might have always known, but never wanted to fully admit. My son had developed the ability to create parallel realities in his mind. Where he could be simultaneously the abandoned son who deserved compensation, and the successful man who built everything himself. Where he could justify theft as something rightfully his, while publicly presenting himself as a victim of family toxicity. It was a form of cognitive dissonance so profound it seemed he truly believed his own lies. The line between truth and fiction had blurred completely for him. And as I watched all this from the silent distance of my empty house, something inside me hardened even more. Because seeing Lawrence not only steal from me, but also steal my story, inverting the roles of victim and victimizer in his public presentation of events, made me understand, there was no redemption possible here. No conversation that would make him see the reality of what he had done. He had chosen his path. He had chosen the lie over the truth. He had chosen image over substance. And I needed to accept that the son I had raised and loved never truly existed in the way I believed, or had been completely replaced by this stranger who could smile for the camera while destroying his mother in private, without apparently feeling any genuine remorse. The moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't planned, but looking back, it had been inevitable. The truth always finds its way out, no matter how many layers of lies try to bury it. I was in Attorney Sanchez's office, reviewing the final documents, when he told me the banks had completed their investigations. They confirmed a total of $17,000 in fraudulent transactions over 3 years. The amount took my breath away. Not just the number, but what it represented, years of planning, premeditation. This wasn't a mistake. Not a moment of weakness. It was a systematic, deliberate operation of theft. The lawyer explained I had more than enough evidence to file criminal charges. But there was another option, a formal demand letter. It would give Lawrence a chance to return the money and compensate for damages before more severe legal action. He said many victims of family fraud offer this courtesy, understanding that family ties complicate things. But he also warned me. This courtesy could be seen as weakness by the perpetrator. Lawrence might respond not with gratitude, but with more manipulation and denial. I thought about it for several minutes, sitting there, looking at the meticulous documents detailing every fraudulent transaction, every unauthorized account, every lie my son had carefully constructed. A small, irrational part of me still hoped. If Lawrence was confronted with irrefutable evidence, maybe something in him would awaken. Maybe a shred of conscience. A flicker of remorse. At least the basic recognition that he had crossed an unforgivable line. That part of me, the part that was still his mother despite everything, wanted to give him that opportunity to do the right thing, to show that somewhere, deep inside, the boy I'd raised with such love and sacrifice still existed. But then, another part of me, stronger and clearer, knew exactly what Lawrence would do. He wouldn't see it as grace. He'd see it as confirmation that I was too weak to truly hurt him. That he could continue to manipulate and control. Because, as his mother, I would always forgive. Always give another chance. Always choose love over justice. That stronger part knew a private warning would only give him time to prepare his defense, hide more evidence, build an even more elaborate narrative of victimization to destroy my credibility publicly before I could act. So I told Attorney Sanchez I didn't want a private letter. I didn't want to give Lawrence any opportunity to respond in private, where he could control the narrative. Instead, I asked him to prepare the documents for a formal civil lawsuit. A public record. Where anyone who wanted to verify the truth could. Instead of just believing Lawrence's carefully crafted social media version. The lawyer nodded, a mix of surprise and respect on his face. He probably didn't expect a woman my age to make such a direct, unambiguous decision. He said he would proceed immediately, and Lawrence would be officially notified within 72 hours. I left that office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something I couldn't identify at first, until I realized it was power. The power of having made a decision completely by myself. Without consulting anyone. Without asking permission. Without worrying about how it would make me look, or if people would think I was being too harsh with my own son. For the first time in decades, I had chosen to protect myself over protecting the feelings or reputation of another person, even when that person was my son. And that choice, though painful, filled me with a sense of integrity I'd forgotten was possible to feel. The notification reached Lawrence on a Thursday morning. Attorney Sanchez confirmed it by phone. I wasn't there to see his initial reaction, but I could perfectly imagine the moment he opened that official envelope. Reading the documents. Every fraudulent transaction, every unauthorized account, every dollar he had stolen, meticulously documented with dates and bank reference numbers. It made denial impossible. I didn't have to wait long for confirmation. Less than 2 hours after he received the notification, my phone began to ring. With an insistence that bordered on desperation. Call after call. I let them all go to voicemail. I had nothing more to say to Lawrence that wasn't already contained in those legal documents. Later that night, when I felt emotionally prepared, I listened to the voicemails. It was disturbing, yet fascinating, to hear the progression of his panic. The first message still tried to maintain composure. That controlled voice he used to seem reasonable. Saying it was a terrible misunderstanding, that we needed to talk immediately before things got more out of control. The second message was different. Higher pitched. More urgent. Pleading with me to call him. Saying this would ruin his life. That I should please think about what I was doing before destroying my own son. As if I were the one destroying something, instead of just revealing the destruction he himself had caused for years. By the fifth message, Lawrence wasn't trying to sound reasonable or appeal to my maternal compassion. He had completely flipped to rage and thinly veiled threats. Telling me I would regret this. That he had his own lawyers, who would prove I was a senile old woman who didn't know what she was doing. That he would fight this with everything he had, and in the end, I was going to be the villain of this story. I listened to each message, allowing myself only a clinical curiosity at how quickly someone could go from pleading to threatening when their usual manipulation tactics stopped working. The following days were a whirlwind of legal and emotional activity. Lawrence didn't stay still. He launched his own counter-campaign, publishing a long, elaborate statement on social media. About how he was the victim of a terrible injustice perpetrated by a mother he supposedly loved, but who was now legally attacking him for reasons he couldn't fully comprehend. His post was carefully drafted to generate maximum sympathy, avoiding any specific details of the accusations. Painting himself as the confused, hurt son dragged through a traumatic legal process by a mother possibly experiencing age-related mental health issues. The response was exactly what he expected, dozens of comments expressing shock and solidarity, telling him to keep his head up, that truth would prevail, that they were on his side no matter what. I watched this from a distance, a mix of awe and repulsion at his ability to manipulate the narrative, even when faced with documented legal charges. But something had changed in me. This time, his public theater didn't affect me the same way. This time, I knew I had something more powerful than his carefully constructed words. Irrefutable legal documents. They couldn't be manipulated with emotional rhetoric or appeals to sympathy. Lawrence's real collapse began when his own lawyers reviewed the evidence. They apparently told him something he didn't want to hear. Suddenly, his social media posts stopped. The silence was deafening in its eloquence. Attorney Sanchez informed me that Lawrence's legal representatives had contacted him, asking about an out-of-court settlement. It confirmed they knew he had no real defense. His best option was to minimize the damage before a public trial revealed all the dirty details. That's when the cracks started appearing in Lawrence's carefully constructed life. Apparently, some of his closest friends began asking uncomfortable questions after his wife casually mentioned a complicated family legal problem at a social gathering. Once people started digging, they found the public documents of the lawsuit, detailing the specific accusations of financial fraud. Mrs. Alice told me she'd heard from other neighbors that Lawrence's name was being whispered in ways that were anything but flattering. People who once saw him as the successful, educated son now looked at him with suspicion. His wife was furious, not necessarily about the moral implications of his actions, but about the damage to their social reputation. Rumors from the neighborhood gossip network spoke of considerable fights in their house. Lawrence tried to call me several more times during those weeks. But I maintained my absolute silence. There was nothing he could say that would change the statement. Reported as identity fraud. Identity fraud, committed by my own son. I hung up, staring at the wall, trying to process how I'd reached this point. Trying to understand when my son had become this. That night, I couldn't sleep. Stared at the ceiling, listening to the city. I thought about all the times I'd justified his behavior. Told myself he was busy, had his own life, that I was being demanding. But this wasn't about expectations anymore. This was theft. Deception. A son who saw his mother as an endless resource to exploit without consequences. The next morning, I did something I had never done. I went to see a lawyer. A small office downtown, William Sanchez, attorney at law. I'd seen an ad for free consultations. I walked in, feeling small, ridiculous. A 62-year-old woman complaining about her own son. But the receptionist smiled kindly and led me in. Attorney Sanchez was a man in his 50s, graying at the temples, with kind eyes. He asked me to tell him everything. I did. The disappeared money. The phantom credit card. The electricity account. The papers Lawrence wanted me to sign. He listened, not interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back, sighed. Mrs. Mendes, he said, what you're describing is financial fraud. A profound breach of trust. If you sign those papers your son wants, you're giving him total legal access to your money. He could empty it all out, and you'd have no legal recourse. Because you yourself gave him permission. His words hit me like stones. I knew it, documented facts. And my silence was, apparently, more devastating to him than any angry word. It meant I had moved completely from anger to indifference. And that indifference was the final death of any power he ever had over me. The final settlement was reached 3 months after I filed the lawsuit. The terms were exactly what Attorney Sanchez and I had established as the minimum acceptable. Lawrence had no choice but to accept. His own lawyers explained that going to trial would mean not only the complete public revelation of all his fraud but also a very real possibility of criminal charges and jail time. He had to return the full $17,000, plus another $5,000 in compensation for damages, in addition to paying for all credit cleanup fees and my lawyer's fees. All of it had to be paid within 6 months, with verifiable monthly payments. One missed payment, and the agreement would be invalidated, and criminal charges would proceed without further warning. But beyond the money, which, honestly, was never the main point, the agreement included a clause I had insisted on adding. Attorney Sanchez initially thought it unnecessary, but for me, it was absolutely essential. That clause stated Lawrence had to issue a public statement acknowledging he had committed financial fraud against his mother, and that the accusations in my lawsuit were true and well-founded. He fought that clause more than any other part of the agreement. He knew exactly what it would mean for his carefully cultivated image, to publicly admit that everything he'd said about being a victim of a toxic mother was a lie, designed to cover up his own crimes. The statement appeared on his social media on a Tuesday afternoon. It was brief, clearly drafted by his lawyers to minimize damage, but the words were there. Black text on a white background. Admitting he had accessed bank accounts without authorization. Opened credit cards using another person's information. Made serious errors in judgment he deeply regretted. The comments under that post were wild. People who had previously supported him unconditionally now expressed shock and disappointment. Others, who had suspected something all along, felt validated. I watched that digital drama unfold with a sense of closure that had nothing to do with satisfaction or revenge, but simply with the quiet recognition that the truth had finally been told publicly. The first payment arrived in my account on the exact date specified. Each subsequent payment arrived punctually. Lawrence knew a single missed payment meant consequences he definitely could not afford. And with that money, I did something maybe he never expected. Instead of putting it back into savings or replacing the furniture I'd sold, I bought a plane ticket to a place I had never been. I had spent 62 years living for other people. First for my son's father, then for my son, and then for the illusion of a family relationship that existed only in my imagination. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I had the freedom and resources to live exactly how I wanted, without justifying my decisions to anyone. I bought a small house in a coastal town, 3 hours from where I'd lived my whole life. A house with 2 rooms and a yard where I could finally plant the flowers I'd always wanted, but never had time for while working 2 jobs. The house cost $40,000, which I paid for in cash using a combination of the payments from Lawrence and the savings I had managed to protect in my new bank account. When I signed the purchase papers, I felt something I could only describe as a rebirth. This house was mine in a way no other place had been before. Purchase with money returned through justice, not earned through endless sacrifice. Lawrence tried to contact me one last time after the final payment was made, completely fulfilling the terms of the agreement. This time, I answered the phone. I knew there was nothing he could take from me or use against me now. His voice sounded different. Smaller. More humble. He asked if we could ever really talk, if there was a possibility of reconciliation. I listened in silence, then responded with words I'd been preparing for months. I told him the son I raised never truly existed, or died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't know and didn't want to know. And although I wished him peace and growth in his life, that peace and growth would have to happen away from me. Because I had closed that door. Not out of hatred, but out of self-love. There was a long silence after my words, then a sound that could have been a sob or just broken breathing, before he hung up without saying anything else. That was the last time I spoke with Lawrence. Some doors, once closed, need to stay closed. Not as a punishment, but as a protection. Now, I live in my small house by the sea. I spend my mornings drinking coffee in my garden, watching the flowers I planted with my own hands grow. There is a peace in this simple life I never found in all those years of sacrifice and giving. Because I finally understood that true love begins with oneself, and no relationship is worth maintaining if it requires you to betray your own dignity. Sometimes Mrs. Alice visits, bringing gossip from the old neighborhood, news of people we used to know. She tells me I look different now. Lighter. More alive in ways that go beyond the physical. I have a routine that is completely mine. I wake when my body wants to wake, not when an alarm clock forces me to. I cook meals I like, without thinking about someone else's tastes. I spend my afternoons reading books I always wanted to read, but never had time for. And at night, I sit on my small porch, listening to the distant sound of the waves, feeling a deep gratitude. Not for what I have in material terms, but for what I finally understood about my own worth. This is my victory. Not the money recovered, or Lawrence's public admission. But the fact that I recovered myself from decades of conditioning that taught me a mother's worth was measured only by how much she could give and how much she could endure. I learned that saying no is an act of self-love. That setting boundaries is not cruelty, but necessity. That protecting your peace is not selfishness, but wisdom. And now, I live every day as a testament to those lessons. Learned too late, perhaps, but not too late to matter. I closed that door on Lawrence, not for revenge, but for dignity. And that distinction. That makes all the difference. Because it means I won, not by becoming his enemy, but simply by refusing to continue being my own victim.